What are you reading in there now? Alex asks her. She flips the magazine around so he can see the double-page spread titled Royal Wedding Madness. Alex groans. This is definitely worse than Willa Cather. What? She says. I want to be prepared for my first ever royal wedding. You went to prom, didn't you? Alex says. Just picture that, only in hell. And you have to be really nice about it. Can you believe they spent $75,000 just on the cake? That's depressing. And apparently Prince Henry is going sans date to the wedding, and everyone is freaking out about it. It says he was. She affects a commercial English accent. Rumored to be dating a Belgian heiress last month. But now, followers of the prince's dating life aren't sure what to think. Alex snorts. It's insane to him that there are legions of people who follow the intensely dull dating lives of the royal siblings. He understands why people care where he puts his own tongue. At least he has personality. Maybe the female population of Europe finally realized he's as compelling as a wet ball of yarn, Alex suggests. Nora puts down her crossword puzzle, having finished it first. Cassius glances over and swears, You gonna ask him to the dance then? Alex rolls his eyes, suddenly imagining twirling around a ballroom with Henry drones sweet nothings about croquet and fox haunting in his ear. The thought makes him want to gag. In his dreams. Oh, Nora says, you're blushing. Listen, Alex tells her, royal weddings are trash. The princes who have royal weddings are trash. The imperialism that allows princes to exit at all is trash. It's trash turtles all the way down. Is this your TED Talk, June asks. You do realize America is genocidal empire too, right? Yes, June, but at least we have the decency not to keep a monarchy around. Alex says, throwing pistachio at her. There are a few things about Alex and June that new White House hires and briefed on before they start. June's peanut allergy, Alex's frequent middle-of-the-night requests for coffee, June's college boyfriend who broke up with her when he moved to California, but is still the only person who letters come to her directly. Alex's long-standing grudge against the youngest prince. It's not a grudge, really. It's even a rivalry. It's a prickling, unsettling annoyance. It makes his palms sweat. The tabloids, the world, decides to cast Alex as the American equivalent of the Prince Henry from day one. Since the White House trio is the closest thing America has to royalty, it never seemed fair. Alex's image is all charisma and genius and smirking wit. Thoughtful interviews and cover of the generic charity appearances. A perfectly blank Prince Charming canvas. Henry's role, Alex thinks, is much easier to play. Maybe it's technically a rivalry. Whatever. All right, MIT. What are the numbers on this one? Nora grins. She pretends to think hard about it. Risks assessment, FSOTUS. Failing to check himself before he wrecks himself result in greater than 500 civilian casualties. 98% probability of Prince Henry looking like a total dreamboat. 78% probability of Alex getting himself banned from the United Kingdom forever. Those are better odds than I expected, June observes. Alex laughs, and the plane soars on. London is an absolute spectacle. Crowds cramming the streets outside Buckingham Palace, and all through the city, draped in Union Jacks and waving tiny flags over their heads. There are commemorative royal wedding souvenirs everywhere. Prince Philip and his bride's face plastered on everything from chocolate bars to underwear. Alex almost can't believe this many people care so passionately about something so comprehensively dull. He's sure there won't be this kind of turnout in the front of the White House when he or June get married one day, nor would he even want it. The ceremony itself seems to last forever, but it's at least sort of nice. In a way, it's not that Alex isn't into love or can't appreciate marriage. It's just that Martha is a perfectly respectable daughter of nobility, and Philip is a prince. It's as sexy as a business transaction. There's no passion, no drama. Alex's kind of love story is much more Shakespearean. It feels like years before he's settled at the table between June and Nora inside Buckingham Palace ballroom for the reception banquet. He's irritated enough to be a little reckless. Nora passes him a flute of champagne. He takes it gladly. Do either of y'all know what a Viscount is? June is saying halfway through a cucumber sandwich. I've met like 5 of them. I keep smiling politely as if I know what it means. When they say it, Alex, you took comparative interracial governmental relational things, whatever, what are they? I think it's that thing when a vampire creates an army of crazed sex waifs and starts his own ruling body. He says, that sounds right, Nora says. She's folding her napkin into a complicated shape. On the table, her shiny black manicure glinting in the chandelier light. I wish I were a Viscount. June says, I could have my sex waifs deal with my emails. Are sex waifs good with professional correspondence? Alex asks. Nora's napkin has become to resemble a bird. I think it could be an interesting approach. Their emails would all be tragic and wanton. She tries on a breathless, husky voice. Oh, please, I beg you, take me. Take me to lunch to discuss fabric samplets, you beast. Could be a weirdly effective, Alex notes. Something is wrong with both of you, June says, gently. Alex is opening his mouth to retort when a royal attendant materializes at their table, like a dense and door-looking ghost in a bad hairpiece. Miss Claremont Reginald, or Bartholomew, or something. He bows, and miraculously his hairpiece doesn't fall off into June's plate. Alex shares an incredulous glance with her behind his back. His Royal Highness, Prince Henry wonders if you would do him the honor of accompanying him for a dance. June's mouth freezes halfway open, caught on a soft vowel sound, and Nora breaks out into a shit-eating grin. Oh, she'd love to, Nora volunteers. She's been hoping he'd ask all evening. June starts and stops, her mouth smiling even as her eyes slice on Nora. Of course, that would be lovely. Excellent, Reginald Bartholomew says. And he turns and gestures over his shoulder. And there Henry is, in the flesh and classically handsome as ever in his tailored three-piece suit, all tousled sandy hair and high cheekbones, and a soft, friendly mouth. He holds himself with innately impeccable posture, as if he emerged fully formed and upright out of some beautiful Buckingham Palace posy garden one day. His eyes lock on Alex's, and something like annoyance or adrenaline spikes in Alex's chest. He hasn't had a conversation with Henry in probably a year. His face is still infuriatingly symmetrical. Henry deigns to give him a perfunctory nod, as if he's any other random guest. Not the person he be to Vogue editorial debut in their teens. Alex blinks, sees, and watches Henry angle his stupid chiseled jaw toward June. "Hello, June," Henry says, as he extends a gentlemanly hand to June, who is now blushing. Nora pretends to swoon. "Do you know how to waltz?" "I'm sure I could pick it up," she says. And she takes his hand cautiously, like she thinks he might be pranking her, which Alex thinks is way too generous of Henry's sense of humor. Henry leads her off to the crowd of twirling nobles. "So, is that what's happening now?" Alex says, glaring down at Nora's napkin bird. "Has he decided to finally shut me up by swooning my sister?" "Oh, little buddy," Nora says. She reaches over and pats his hand. "It's cute how you think everything is about you. It should be, honestly." "That's the spirit." He glances up into the crowd where June is being rotated around the dance floor by Henry. She's got a neutral, polite smile on her face. He keeps looking over her shoulder, which is even more annoying. June is amazing. The least Henry could do is pay attention to her. Do you think he actually likes her, though? Nora shrugs. Who knows? Royals are weird. Might be a courtesy, or there it is. A royal photographer has swooped in and is snapping a shot of them dancing. One Alex knows will be leaked to Hello next week. So that's it then. Using the first daughter to start some idiotic dating rumor for attention. God forbid Philip gets to dominate the news cycle for 1 week. He's kind of good at this, Nora remarks. Alex flags down a waiter and decides to spend the rest of the reception getting systematically drunk. Alex has never told, will never tell anyone, but he saw Henry for the first time when he was 12 years old. He only reflects upon it when he's drunk. He's sure he saw his face in the news before then, but that was the first time he really saw him. June had just turned 15 and used part of her birthday money to buy an issue of blindingly colorful teen magazine. Her love of trashy tabloids started early. In the center of the magazine were miniature posters of you could rip out and stick up in your locker. If you were careful enough and pried up the staples with your fingernails, you could even get them out without tearing them. One of them, right in the middle, was a picture of a boy. He had thick, tawny hair and big blue eyes, a warm smile, and a cricket bat over one shoulder. It must have been a candid. Because there was a happy, sunbright confidence to him that couldn't be posed. On the bottom corner of the page, in pink and blue letters, Prince Henry. Alex still doesn't really know what kept drawing him back, only that he would sneak into June's room and find the page, touch his fingertips to the boy's hair, as if he could somehow feel its texture, if he imagined it hard enough. The more how its texture if he imagined it hard enough, the more his parents climbed the political ranks. The more he started to reckon with the fact that soon the world would know who he was. Then sometimes he'd think of the picture and try to harness Prince Henry's easy confidence. He also thought about prying up the staples with his fingers and taking the picture out and keeping it in his room, but he never did. His fingernails were too stubby. They weren't made for it like June's, like girls. But then came the first time he met Henry. The first cool, detached words Henry said to him. And Alex guessed he had it all wrong. That the pretty, flung open boy from the picture wasn't real. The real Henry is beautiful, distant, boring, and closed. This person the tabloids keep comparing him to, whom he compares himself to, thinks he's better than Alex and everyone like him. Alex can't believe he ever wanted to be anything like that. Alex keeps drinking, keep alternating between thinking about it and forcing himself not to think about it. Disappears into the crowd and dances with pretty European heiresses about it. He's pirouetting away from one when he catches a sight of lone figure hovering near the cake. The champagne fountain. It's Prince Henry yet again. Glass in one hand, watching Prince Philip and his bride spinning on the ballroom floor. He looks politely half interested in that obnoxious way of his, like he has somewhere else to be, and Alex can't resist the urge to call his bluff. He picks his way through the crowd, grabbing a glass of wine off a passing tray and drowning half of it. When you have one of these, Alex says, sidling up to him, you should do 2 champagne fountains instead of 1. Really embarrassing to be at a wedding with only 1 champagne fountain. Alex, Henry says in that maddling posh accent. Up close, the waistcoat under his suit jacket is a lush gold and has about 1,000,000 buttons on it. It's horrible. I wondered if I'd have the pleasure. Looks like it's your lucky day, Alex says, smiling. Truly a momentous occasion. Henry agrees. His own smile is bright white and immaculate, made to be printed on money. The most annoying thing of all is Alex knows Henry hates him too. He must. They are naturally mutual antagonists. But he refuses to outright act like it. Alex is intimately aware politics involves a lot of making nice of people you loathe. But he wishes that once, just once, Henry would act like an actual human and not some polished little wind-up toy sold in a palace gift shop. He is too perfect. Alex poked it. Alex wants to poke it. Do you ever get tired, Alex says, of pretending you are above all of this? Henry turns and stares at him. I'm sure I don't know what you mean. I mean, you're out here getting the photographers to chase you, swanning around like you hate the attention. Which you clearly don't, since you're dancing with my sister of all people. Alex says, you act like you're too important to be anywhere. Doesn't that get exhausting? I'm a bit more complicated than that, Henry attempts. Huh. Oh, Henry says, narrowing his eyes. You're drunk. I'm just saying, Alex says, resting an overly friendly elbow on Henry's shoulder. which isn't as easy as he'd like it to be, since Henry has about 4 infuriating inches of height on him. You can try and act like you're having fun occasionally. Henry laughs ruefully. I believe perhaps you should consider switching to water, Alex. Should I? Alex says. He pushes aside the thought, and maybe the wine is what gave him the nerve to stomp over to Henry in the first place. It makes his eyes as coy and angelic as he knows. Am I offending you? Sorry, I'm not obsessed with you like everyone else. I know that must be confusing for you. Do you know what? Henry says. I think you are. Alex's mouth drops open, while the corner of Henry's turns smug and almost a little mean. Only a thought, Henry says. Tone polite. Have you ever noticed I have never once approached you and have been exhaustively civil every time we've spoken? Yet here you are, seeking me out again. He takes a sip of his champagne. Simply an observation. What? I'm not, Alex stammers. You're the... Have a lovely evening, Alex, Henry says tersely, and turns to walk off. It drives Alex nuts that Henry thinks he gets to have the last word. And without thinking, he reaches out and pulls Henry's shoulder back. And then Henry turns, suddenly, and almost does push Alex off this time. It was for a brief spark of the moment. Alex is impressed at the glint in his eyes, the abrupt burst of an actual personality. The next thing you know, he is tripping over his own foot and stumbling backward into the table nearest him. He notices, too late, that the table is, to his horror, the one bearing the massive 8-tier wedding cake. And he grabs for Henry's arm to catch himself, but all it does is throw both of them off balance and send them crashing together into the cake stand. He watches as if in slow motion as the cake leans, teeters, shudders, and finally tips. There's absolutely nothing he can do to stop it. It comes crashing down. The table is an avalanche of white buttercream, some kind of sugary $75,000 nightmare. The room goes heart-stoppingly silent as a momentum carries him and Henry through the fall and down onto the wreckage of the cake and the ornate carpet. Henry's sleeve still clutched into Alex's fist. Henry's glass of champagne has spilled all over both of them and shattered. And out of the corner of his eye, Alex can see a cut across the top of Henry's cheekbone, beginning to bleed. For a second, all he can think as he stares up at the ceiling while covered in frosting and champagne is that at least Henry's dance with June won't be the biggest story to come out of the royal wedding. His next thought is that his mother is going to murder him in cold blood.